Hello everyone, welcome to the spoiler talk for Punisher Season 2. Yes boys, Castiglione's back! And also, welcome to the year of the Punisher. And also, I don't know how many more alsos there are gonna be, but maybe a couple more. That's why I've already been able to say a couple of alsos so that I'm ahead of myself. Anyway, this is technically the official start of 2018. I know I said that they Runaways, but it's not true. Because of the fact that I looked on the MCU timeline and apparently they pulled back on Runaways, taking place earlier so that it ends in May. That means that this is the official start of 2018, but also, like I said before, it is the year of the Punisher because of the fact that Punisher is not only appearing in Daredevil Born Again Season 2 and getting his own special, but also he is appearing in Spider-Man, baby. So I'm very excited for the year of the Punisher. To be honest, Marvel has felt ashamed over the last couple of years for the Punisher, especially because of the fact that I guess he uses guns and you get the whole gun debate. Then apparently this is something that I didn't know until Born Again came out, funny enough. I had never heard of this, but apparently some corrupt cops, or let's say all corrupt cops, because I was gonna say some cops, but then I just decided to focus on the corruption. So the corrupt cops decided to use the Punisher logo in order to commit crimes in real life, which made Marvel entirely ashamed of Punisher. And they also, because of the whole gun debate, decided to give him swords, which was a debacle. I'll say that right now. That is not how he works. I mean, Punisher uses everything at his disposal. If there's a sword at his disposal, he'll slice someone up with a sword. The thing is just, he always starts off with the guns that he's got with him. But it's nice to see Punisher back in the spotlight where he deserves to be. Now, I have also seen a lot of people complain about this season. There are two moments in the season where I will agree with you guys on the complaints about the season, and we'll get there when we get there. But let's just get into the first episode, shall we? So, we start this one off with Castle being in a van, bloody, driving away from an ambush. That is classic Castle, boys. However, he has a girl in the van as well. So then we jump to earlier, and for the rest of this episode, we're gonna basically make our way to this moment. So Pete is at a bar. He gets a drink from a nice lady, and also a girl that we saw in the future as being next to him in the van insults him, and also he saves the woman from a creep, and then they kind of start to develop a romance. Also, the girl calls the person who she's supposed to deliver something to, and she wants to do it immediately, and he is being tortured by a guy named Pilgrim, who is going to be one of the main threats of this season. And now he has the location of the girl. Also, everyone that the girl was with is dead now, sadly enough. So yeah, that happened because of this Pilgrim fellow. So then Pilgrim kills the guy that she called and now knows the location. But Frank has a bit of a romance with a woman named Beth from behind the bar, and yeah, they have a nice moment together. Eva meets the kid, goes out to buy some pancakes. Pete is such a nice guy, isn't he? However, afterwards he wants to leave. Also, the girl actually broke into a hotel room and then has to escape that one as well. But anyway, Frank wants to leave after his one night stand with the girl. However, he decides to go back because, you know what, maybe it could be something, you know, and also we need a season. So if he did not go back to that bar, we wouldn't have a season. So he goes back all happy, but then he sees the girl running for the bathroom and being followed by a bunch of people. So Frank goes in, kills everyone except for one, as Frank usually does. And then we have a big bar fight. Sadly enough, a big guy called Ringo, sadly enough, gets killed. R.I.P. the boy. However, Beth also gets shot. So when everyone is dead, Frank picks her up, puts her in the van, and then drives away with her. However, they're being followed back to present day. Frank kills the followers, and then afterwards he brings the girl to the hospital. And I like that where he gets out of the van and the hospital guys are like, oh my god, are you okay? It's like, alright, leave me alone, okay? There's a girl in the back of my van, she needs your help. And then everyone and then three of them roll her into the hospital while one of them is like, don't you stay here, don't leave. It's like, yeah, he's gonna leave, obviously. Also, he keeps stopping the girl from leaving as well, but he gets in the van with the girl, and then he drives off into the night, and he hopes that there's going to be more because Punisher is back, baby. Also, Pilgrim arrives at the bar, sees the aftermath. Turns out one girl actually survived, and she found the backpack, so that isn't really that good. And Pilgrim now still wants the girl, and also technically the Punisher as well. Weird that he doesn't know who that is, but hey, whatever, you know what? And also we see Madani standing over Billy's bed because she has been watching him ever since we last saw the two of them. And then to end the episode off, Billy awakens. So then Frank almost falls asleep while in the van, and eventually he decides to stop at a motel in order to take care of his wounds, which one of them was in the booty. So we get to see his behind, which I did not know I needed to see, and I still did not need to see that. But hey, he got shot there, so the girl stitches him up, and then in order for her not to run away, he ties her to the bed, and then he just goes to sleep. And she's like, you're just gonna sleep while I'm tied there like this. And when she makes noise, he puts duct tape over her mouth, and then he goes to sleep. Billy also has nightmares about the skull on Punisher's chest, and he has memory loss. He doesn't really remember anything. Really, the only stuff that he remembers are like the military days together with his buddy Frank. You remember that one? That's really all that he remembers. And he also gets therapy from a woman named Krista. So then in the hospital, Pilgrim arrives, and he asks obviously about this mystery fellow, and she's like, his name is Pete, after her son gets threatened. Pete Castiglione. So she still does not give him the real name, but she does give him the fake name, which I do like that about her. She still cares about Frank, because she understands that Frank is a good guy. So then when Punisher wakes up, he asks the girl about who she is and why they're after her, and she once again doesn't give straight answers. So he decides to search her, and he finds a couple of rolls of film from a camera, so that's fun. However, she still doesn't really want to say anything about it, but he will not let her go. So Frank once again ties and duct tapes her, and then decides to go out to do a wee bit of shopping. You know, food is also something that you require. So Pilgrim arrives at the old hotel and searches Pete's room that he had rented. However, the bed was not slept in because of the fact that he slept with the woman, and now they wait for any sign of them to show up. So Frank goes to the lady in order to buy another room, and I actually did like the lady. It was funny the way that she talked back, because he wants to get a double room, and she's like, what if I actually get guests? You said you'd tell me you're alone. Why do you need a double room? And he's like, guess what guest? Their convention or something like that? Just give me that other room, okay? And then she's like, fine, but I'm gonna charge you double. It's like, okay, fine. But then when he buys the other room, he comes back into the first room, gives her a sandwich and some cola, and then decides to break down the wall to the other room because of the fact that he knows that they're gonna be attacked. Also, Madani meets with Rafi, who was not happy about her going to see Russo over and over and over again. Not a good idea. You need to let it go. So then at nighttime, Frank notices that there are some bad guys outside, so he gives her a gun. Also, by the way, her name is Amy. I'll just let that out right now. But Frank gives Amy a gun so that she can defend herself. However, then Amy wants to use the gun in order to escape, but Frank is like, shoot me then. And she doesn't, so it's like, okay, fine. Silence! We need to focus on this. So then Frank and Amy walk through the room, which the guy outside sees, so he knows that they're inside. So then when the strike team goes in, there's no one here. Everywhere gets shot in the room. However, turns out that hole that Frank made, yeah, they're in the other room hiding. So Frank comes out of the closet, not like that, and then he starts shooting everyone to death. And then he has a shootout with the guy outside, and also the woman at the reception desk calls the cops. So then Amy wants to escape. However, then the woman, who keeps surviving for some reason, opens the door, and then Frank knocks her out because he needs to get some information. So it's better to just have a hostage as well. So he takes her to the van. However, she wakes up, and then we have a little bit of hijinks. Frank gets shot in the hand. However, then he takes her down, but Amy decides to steal the van in order to escape. However, that is when the cops arrive and everyone gets arrested. So then Amy lies to the cops, and obviously Frank says absolutely nothing. So then the prints get added to the system, which is also what the computer guy with Pilgrim is looking into. So they got a hit. Now they know where to go. And Frank gets one phone call, and he calls Madani, who's like, you're on your own, Frank, and then hangs up. So then Frank is like, nobody was home. It's like, really? You know, all that conversation, nobody was home. Cool. And then it's like, okay, you're looking at 4 counts of murder, okay? That is a death penalty sentence, okay? It's just a death penalty sentence. And then Frank is like, I didn't kill him. Alright, then who did? They died from terminal stupidity. And I almost fell out of my chair laughing. I could not hold myself back. That's the funniest thing I have ever heard in my life. They died of terminal stupidity. That was so funny. And then we end the episode with Pilgrim outside watching, because next episode will be the assault on the police station and Frank defending said police station. So we get a little bit of a backstory on Pilgrim. He's at the church, and also apparently the people who own the church or whatever, their whole role is not fully explained just yet. But basically they are paying for his wife's treatment because she's sick, and also apparently there is something that comes out that they don't want out, so they want him to stop it, aka the film roles that Frank now has taken from Amy. So that's why he got sent on the mission. And if you know anything about a church and something that can do damage to a church, yeah, you know what this is. It's got a couple couple of colors as well, I think. But we'll deal with that when it comes. So Frank is in the prison cell next to the woman who tried to kill him. And they have a little bit of a bonding moment. Not really, but it sounds fun, so I wrote it in there. Amy is also playing with the cop named Ken, the youngest of the cops. So that's fun, you know. I mean, she's not playing with him. She plays him in that sense. Give me $5 and I'll show you what how I can make your life better or something like that. I forgot what she said. However, then the sheriff comes in and is like, oh boy, she has too many aliases, boys. Yes, this is a girl who has apparently changed her name more times than I have changed underwear in my entire life. So that Frank warns the sheriff about the fact that everything is gonna go horribly wrong. Meanwhile, in New York, Billy is having some trouble with his therapy, and he starts to become a bit violent, which causes cops to come in. However, when he gets a little bit more violent, not in any like physical sense, but he starts to yell close to the therapist, the cops want to take him down. The problem is he is too good. So he takes care of the cops, and then he uses the therapist named Krista in order to escape from the hospital. So that's gonna be a bit of a problem. Also, Pilgrim has a cop guy with him, and that cop guy tries to get Frank and Amy. However, the sheriff guy doesn't want to give them up, and when he keeps trying, the sheriff guy's like, hey, what's that sign by the diner that we like so much? Management refuses right to refuse service. Like, right, we need to get one of those. Which is another funny joke. See, Netflix can be funny, you know, 2 already. It's a great joke. Because you're not getting them. So that Pilgrim kind of slightly threatens him. So that isn't really all that fun. And he walks outside. He tells the cop guy to leave. He puts his hand out. And then the electricity goes down. The lines have been cut. Which means there's a jammer outside. And the attack begins from the woods. All the men make sure to get into position. Meanwhile, Madani is absolutely upset that Russo is there. And Mahoney's back, baby. Yes, he is back for this episode. Very nice to see him again. Big fan of Brett Mahoney. Really hope he is in Born Again Season 2. I saw like a tweet about the fact that maybe his actor was spotted close to the set. So maybe, just maybe, they'll bring him back. Please bring him back. Put him on the Daredevil team. So that Frank finally tells the true story of everything that had happened. However, it doesn't make his situation any better because they still don't really want his help, even though technically if you get his help, everyone leaves here. Instead, Ken comes up with the idea to go out there and get it out of range of the jammer and also then call for backup. So they agree to his plan and he goes outside, gets in the car, gets shot, and well, that's about it. However, he is not killed yet. So the sheriff goes outside to pick him up, takes him back inside, and still he does not want Frank's help, even though Frank is like, look, I'll help, okay? Just cut me loose. I'll take care of this. So then shots fire from the forest and the cops are fighting back. However, Frank is like, it's a diversion. Cover the back door, which Frank was right, but he is too confident about it. The sheriff is like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. It's reinforced. They're not getting through. And then boom, they got through. They come in from the back. So then Amy frees Frank, and I like how the woman cop that's there as well is like, he's loose. It's like, yes, he is. And Frank takes care of the people. However, he does not escape, and he does get a vest, even though it doesn't have the skull on it. RIP the skull, but we'll get that one back later on. Don't worry about it. Can't wait for it. So then some of the cops there are like, we should just let him, we should have sent him out there to, I guess, die. However, then Ken stands up and is like, no, okay, we should not do that because of the fact that these are not bad people or whatever he says. Anyway, he does stand up for them, which is nice. Also, Pilgrim kills the woman that failed on her mission twice now, so he's not happy about that. And Frank convinces the sheriff guy to first of all give him duct tape for his arm, I guess so that he can hold the gun better, and also to let him go outside. So Frank gets a couple of clips on him and he decides to go into the forest, and he takes care of everyone. Like Billy said in the last season, I love watching your work, Frank, and I do. This scene is fantastic. But he takes care of everyone except for the fact that he almost gets shot by Pilgrim, but this is when Homeland arrives, which causes him to be blinded a bit and miss his shot on Frank, even though I don't really know where he was aiming, because technically he was aiming on his back, and if you look, he's wearing a vest, so even if he was shot in the back, the vest would have caught it. He would have fallen down though, but like he wouldn't have been killed necessarily. So I'm not gonna say that Homeland saved him, it's just it saved him from a little bit of pain, let's just say that. But sadly enough, Pilgrim is able to escape, and Madani is here because of the fact that Billy escaped and she needs Frank back. And then the sheriff guy's like, look man, after everything you've done for us, even if she didn't come here, you guys were never here anyway, I would have let you go. And then Frank's like, look, I need the girl. You understand, right? I need the girl. So then he does get the girl girl. And then later on, he also gets the bag full of guns and also the pictures as well. And then Amy is like, where are we going? And both Frank and Madani are like, New York. So Billy is on a bus. Weird that they allow someone who looks like that to go on a bus, but whatever. You know, without any shoes, for example. But he's on the bus. Then a guy, an annoying guy, very annoying guy, a prick, even if some people would like to call him that. I will allow that. He comes inside the bus and he kind of starts to annoy Billy a bit. I don't really know if Billy is fully annoyed by him, but he's annoyed enough in order to go outside and go after him, kill him, and take his clothing. And we got Billy back, baby, outside of the scars. Also, can we talk about that? Because that is, look, there are 2.5 problems with this season. I will talk about each problem as they appear. This is the half problem, because technically, nowadays, you can do a lot with surgery. Also, I understand looking at later on in the season, because if he actually looked like comic book Jigsaw, he was never going to be able to pull a hot woman like Krista. But, like, they should have still gone through with it, if I'm being honest here. I really wish they had gone through with it. Also, Frank is staying in the apartment that Madani owns, and Rafi is not really happy about the whole Billy Russo Frank stuff, but Madani lies to him about the fact, don't worry about it. I told him nothing about Billy, and also I dropped Frank outside the city, don't worry about it. But also, you make a deal with someone, who's to say they're not gonna honor it or anything like that, you know? A deal like that is always a chance for the deal not to be honored. So then Amy starts berating Frank with questions, and Frank will not answer them at all because he just doesn't care. So then he's like, you take the bedroom, I'll sleep on the couch, just like any guy would do. And she goes into the bedroom, locks the door, and gets on the bed. Doesn't feel comfortable, so she rolls under the bed, and we get to see a bit of the flashback sequence of what happened to her. And basically, back in the day, she had fun with her friends. However, she went out. Later on, we learned she went to buy tacos, and when she came back, opened up the hotel room door where they were staying, it turned out everyone was dead. So that's fun. Also, we learned that Billy decorated the mask. That was nice of him to do. He should have looked like that in the show, though. Just saying. And also, Madani apparently stole Billy's book when she was at the crime scene last time, and she shows it to Frank, and Frank opens it up and sees nothing but his Punisher logo. And Frank is actually happy about it. He's like, good. I wanted him to remember what he did. I wanted him to remember. But that's just the thing. He may not remember fully. Also, she kept the Punisher vest, which I am very happy about. Nice to see that bad boy again. And in a way, Madani wants Frank to do what she cannot do, and that is to officially kill Billy Russo. Like, she can't do it, but he can, obviously. At least that's what he's trying to get her to say to him, but she never really fully admits it. So Frank decides to lock the bedroom door so that, you know, Amy can't escape, and then he decides to visit his friend, Curtis. Yes, he is back once again. Nice to see him again. He's also dating. How nice. And he wants the woman out of this type of life. Understandable. And also, Frank asks if Kurt truly believes that Billy forgot everything. And Kurt is like, yep. Look, man, what you did is you went too far, okay? Because of the fact that you wanted him to live with what he had done by scarring up his face. What you did is the fact that we have to live with what he did, and he's the only one who gets to forget it. And then also we get a flashback of Billy talking to Frank about the abuse that he faced back in the day because he used to love baseball, but then, yeah, someone kind of broke his arm and he didn't want to do it anymore. So Billy visits that guy the next day, and yeah, the dude is not sorry about molesting kids at all. He is not sorry at all. He's like, I loved you kids, and some of you kids were happy to love me back. And I'm like, you know what? Billy may be the bad guy, and I know we're not supposed to be rooting for him, but just this once, can we? Can we just root for Billy this once, please? Because that guy deserves nothing but death. And that's what Billy does after he says that Billy kills him. Also, later on, Frank comes back and he opens the bedroom door, which Amy is banging on, and then she's like, don't ever lock me in. And then she tells him about the nightmare, and she comes kind of fully clean, and we get more of an extended version, but not in the flashback, because this one is told, not show. Because after she found her friends dead, apparently Pilgrim came back, so she hid under the bed, and that is how she was able to survive, because he never found her. And then she confronts Frank about something that she should not have said. She's like, do you have any idea what it feels like to have the people you care about die, being dead in front of you? And it's like, oh, Oh, you should not have said that. Now, Frank obviously doesn't do anything. He doesn't really react. Maybe he has a little bit of a facial reaction, but he doesn't say anything or anything like that. But it's nice that she told him the truth. So then later on, Frank and Amy are just eating, and Madani comes back in, even though I actually wrote Mahoney in there. So this kind of confused me a little bit in my notes, but sometimes you write the wrong names, especially when they kind of are the same. Mahoney, Madani, you know, it's got the same kind of ring to it. But anyway, they start talking about Billy Russo and where he could be. Also, Amy's like, who are you people? And they're both like, shut it. But basically, Frank tells Madani about the fact that there used to be a pedophile at the children's home, and maybe he would go after that. However, before this conversation can go any further, there's a knock on the door, and it's Mahoney. So Amy and Frank hide in the bedroom, and Mahoney talks to Madani, and he's like, oh, hey, it looks like you got over Billy because of the fact that there's 2 plates. However, she's trying to kind of get him away. So after he leaves, she leaves as well. However, he did say something that Amy heard. He said Frank Castle. So now she has his full name. So then after Mahoney leaves and also Madani leave, Frank is like, I'm gonna take a shower. And Amy also leaves. She goes to a computer store and looks up Frank Castle and learns about the legend of Punisher himself. So Madani goes over to the house of where the bastardo lives, and she hears something behind her after she sees the dead body, and she instantly shoots. And luckily enough, he was wearing a vest because Mahoney followed her, and he's like, I could have you fired for this. And she's like, oh, try it then. So she is not necessarily afraid, even though she's kind of a little bit afraid. So then Billy, after killing the pedophile, goes back to Krista, and she tells him to clean up in the bathroom while she calls the cops. However, she decides not to call the cops after she has a bit more flashbacks with Billy, and she decides to help him because that is what happens, you know. Sometimes the therapists get a little bit too attached to the patient, especially when that patient is a scarred homicidal maniac. So who's ready for some card tricks with Amy? Because that's how this episode starts off. Her basically tricking Frank with the whole card tricks, and him losing over and over, because even when she says how it works, she changes it up to be fully honest in order to once again trick Frank. So then once it is time, we pay a visit to Turk, and by the way, this is the last appearance Turk has within the MCU. I miss him already, but he's kind of gone into the straight and narrow, so at least that is good. But we need Konchevsky. These Russian names, I swear. But anyway, we need him. Also, Billy has some problems, but then Krista tells him to count 5 blue things in the room, and that kind of calms him down as well. And also, Madani has a big nightmare about Billy Russo, so I guess she is the one who is the most haunted by what Billy had done, and she wants Billy behind bars. That is what she wants, even though deep within she wants him dead, just like the rest of us. But Frank tells Turk, look, you make a deal with the Russians, you get to have 25% after some finagling. It eventually turns to 25% of whatever money that you can get out of the situation. Also, Pilgrim is in a basement hitting himself, so that is fun. You know, everyone needs to get their rocks off somehow. But then he gets a visit from the Schultzes. Not that one. Sadly enough, they didn't have a son named Herman because, you know, he's kind of black. Kind of doesn't really work with 2 white parents. You can't really get that. It would have been a nice tie to Spider-Man, but yeah, sadly enough, Homecoming did race swap Herman Schultz. And Anderson wants Pilgrim to go over to New York in order to be able to take care of the girl and the Punisher, obviously. However, he has some hesitation, but his wife eventually convinces him to go, and also tells him that when he returns, she will be still here and alive. Yeah, that's not happening. So Turk goes into the gym of Russians, and he asks for Konchevsky. However, he learns that Konchevsky's dead. So then he gets caught by the Russians. So Frank returns home. However, during an argument with Madani earlier in the episode, Amy stole her credit card and has apparently been spending a lot of it. And Frank is initially not happy until he sees something nice. And he's like, ooh. And also, Amy's like, look, I've been thinking about this whole situation and nothing adds up. Because why did Konchevsky not just come to get me and kill me someplace else? Because obviously she would have gone with him, and then he could have done the deed himself by killing her. So Amy deduces that the dude's dead, and Frank's like, yeah, that makes sense. So then Krista has a client over named Jake who Billy takes an interest in because you know how Billy works, right? And also Madani visits Curtis, but the problem is the fact that he is not going to talk to her until after the session, because if he makes them wait for her, then he's gonna make them feel like they're not important. And I love this about Kurt. This little aspect of Kurt is really good, because a lot of people in in like the help profession, I guess you could say, you know, and in a lot of different ways, do not understand this. And I know, because I have experienced this a lot as well, where I have felt like I don't matter because, oh, you're gonna get a phone call in the middle of our session? No, leave, okay? Don't come back. You don't care about me, okay? The phone call's more important. I see how it is in that sense. I understand that. And then he invites her to sit in, which she does. However, Jake, who also is here, once again, Kurt, you really need to pick these people out better. I'm sorry, dude, but what is it with guys that are in your circle and then also those guys being linked to Billy? That happened last season, happens again this season. Different storyline though. However, Jake is not happy that Madani's here, so Madani tells him a story and then he's like, okay, I'm sorry, ma'am. Proceed by sitting in here. And then after the meeting, Madani and Kurt talk a little bit more, and Kurt basically says, I wish Frank killed Billy, back at the carousel. So then Jake goes to a bar. Billy also goes to said bar, and he basically talks a little bit with him, and you know, every good soldier needs an army, right? And that is kind of what we are trying to build here with Billy. We're gonna build an army. So Frank gets a call from Turk about the deal, and apparently the deal is gonna be made at his place. So Frank goes to the gym instead of his place and lets all the other guys head over to Turk's place. So he goes into the gym, and then when the guy doesn't want to answer Frank's questions, he decides to beat up every Russian there, which in some way is also kind of unbelievable, but he is special forcesly trained, so. But he takes everyone out, and then the guy talks and obviously confirms that the dude's dead, and also the fact that we got a new name called Nikolai, I think it actually was. And then later on, when Amy looks the dude up, it turns out that he is a powerful man. He is most certainly a powerful man. So then Krista decides not to jump out of the window, so she has some demons of her own as well. Don't know if she's really the best at being a therapist, if, you know, you want to kind of jump out of windows. I don't know, just saying. And also Castle and Amy leave Madani's place and also put all the receipts and the credit card, and apparently Kurt has found a place for them to stay. So we have a new hideout, boys. And also to end the episode, Pilgrim kills all the Russians that Frank did not kill in order to, I guess, leave no trace and all that stuff. Ah yes, the episode that everyone has a problem with because of the fact that two things happen in this episode people just don't like. I'm also a little bit annoyed by it because yes, Frank should have killed him, but he didn't, but he should have. So let's get into it. So this episode starts off with the fact that Frank and Amy are using a pedo bait in order to get inside of a guy who likes to take pictures of little girls, as Frank calls him. I think I'm actually quoting that one perfectly. And they are in there in order to develop the photos from the rolls in order to truly see what is a problem here. However, Frank should have killed him, but Amy stops him and then is like, hey, you could just still burn the place down. No, Frank should have killed him, okay? I understand the issue. I also understand why Frank didn't do it because of the fact that the girl was there. To be honest, this one is less offensive than the next one later on in the episode. Like, this one can be explained away. It's because she doesn't want him to kill, and he is not gonna kill someone in front of her. Also, Kurt gets a guy glasses. Dude, Curtis is just the best, isn't he? He is the best. And also, Frank teaches Amy how to disarm someone, which is also very nice. And also, Billy apparently sneaks back into the place and sees Krista in her underwear. So that might have been nice for him. Bunch of nice things are happening right now. So then later on, Billy visits Curtis only because he wants to know who did that to his face. And Curtis will not answer him. However, in Billy's head, they're still friends. So this is really weird for Billy. But to be honest, you kind of did it yourself. In my opinion, he should have just been kind of honest with him. Not about the fact that Frank was going to kill him. Just like, tell him the bad stuff that he did so that he knows why there's like a war here kind of thing. And also, Mahoney visits Madani because of the fact that he wants to know about the third man at the carousel all those years ago. And he knows that it's Frank, but he wants to hear her say it, but she will not say it. So, Frank, it's finally time to kidnap Nikolai, which, by the way, I can never hear Nikolai again, thanks to Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Every time I hear Nikolai, I hear that voice in the head being like Nikolai. It's like, what? It's just so annoying. But it's time to kidnap him, which I actually like how they do that. Frank pretends to be a homeless drunk guy in order to get the limousine. And then Amy goes inside and gives him the menu, and he opens it up and he sees the picture of the two guys kissing and is like, I didn't know they had this in season. So then she gets followed, but she is able to blend in with some high school girls in order to be able to escape, which I also thought was nice. How did she know that they were there? Probably scoping the place out, obviously. And then Frank hits the other guy out of the limo in order to drive off with Nikolai. Meanwhile, Pilgrim has his eye on Madani and he eventually follows her, but she don't do that to Madani, so she turns around and he wants to know know where Castle is, and also the girl. However, she won't answer it, but then she goes back to the diners like, touch nothing, because there might be Prince of the bad guy. Because while people may think that he is actually the main villain of this season, he's not really the main villain. Like, the main storyline of this season is still Frank versus Billy, Punisher versus Jigsaw, if you really want to be correct. It's just in order to get to the 13 episodes, we need to get Pilgrim in here as well. So Nikolai tells Castle everything about the Schultz and the gay son, and the fact that, you know, the Schultz have a child and he's supposed to take over the business, but he can't really take over the business if he's gay. So it cannot come out that he is gay, because that would be a huge embarrassment. And it's like, oh, okay, so you're one of those people, huh? And here we come with the problem. Castle is ready to kill him, but then he's like, not in the face, okay? I don't want my wife and daughter to not be able to recognize me. Shoot me in the chest. And in a sense, I understand why Frank would actually then aim for his chest. But then the daughter conversation comes in, and he's just like, oh, I'll let you live, but leave New York and never come back, or I will kill you. It's like, dude, like, before you had an answer, and that was the fact that Amy was there. But like, here, you don't. You should have killed him. But don't worry, just like with Jim, Pilgrim takes care of it. So then Billy meets up with the boys. However, then Glasses guy comes in, the guy who earlier got the glasses, and he's like, they're towing away my car, which is my home, basically. So then Billy and the boys help him get his car back. However, Billy gets a little bit violent with the tow guy, and then later on, after everything has been done, he tells him to leave and also to change the plates, and he drives off. Bye, Glasses guy. And then one of the guys is like, why don't we just rob a bank? It's like, that's what your mind goes to immediately, huh? Like, the one guy, Jake, he's like, we should do protection or something like that, and then he's just like, yeah, we should rob a bank. It's like, dude, what? So that guy is talking about honest work that they should do, and you're talking about becoming a criminal. What? Why? That is just not a good idea. Come on, man. But this obviously piques Billy's interest. However, Glasses dude did get picked up by the cops because of the fact that he took a nap, and he tells this to Curtis, and also he tells him about Billy. So that makes Curtis a little bit annoyed, and he now knows what he must do. Meanwhile, Mahoney goes over to Krista because of the fact that he has a piece of paper that allows him to get the files on Billy Russo. However, she hides a yellow paper, so she doesn't give him everything. And it turns out once Mahoney leaves, Billy was there the entire time, and she's like, I'm now a criminal because of you. And then they get a little bit of a fight. He's also like, who is KM? And then afterwards they kiss. So is that how romance works? Look, I don't know, okay? I don't really know how romance works. Never really been in a relationship myself, but is that how that works? So basically what I would have to do when I find a girl that I find attractive is I need to push her against something and then have her stab me in the hand and twist the knife, and then I can make out with her. That's how it goes, right? Or am I seeing that wrong? By the way, that's an obvious joke. Anyway, Curtis calls both Madani and Frank together in order to share the information. And Madani wants to know about Pilgrim, and then Curtis is like, hey, shut it, okay? We need to focus on Billy, okay? Whatever your problem is, it can wait. We have to focus on Billy Russo. He is the main problem for all of us. And let's be honest here, he is. Curtis is not wrong. So how are we gonna deal with Billy Russo? Alright, before we get into this episode, I would just like to say, actually, since episode 5, I've wanted to say this. I have been wearing today my Punisher shirt, so I am prime and ready to go. Anyway, this episode starts off 1 year ago when Madani woke up and she had to give a statement full of lies, but she didn't want to do it because she wanted to say the truth. But to be honest, the truth this time around does not set you free, so just lie. So eventually she caves and she does lie about the fact that, you know, of what happened, and basically just fully omits Frank's involvement. And Madani still has issues with Frank wanting to kill Billy. However, Curtis knows a guy who can help find Billy, that being the good old-fashioned Jake. So Frank and Curtis go to his house. Problem is, he's not home, and afterwards they go over to the bar and wait for the rest of the day. So they're kind of out of the story now. Krista and Billy are also a couple now for some reason. I mean, I knew there was something wrong with her, but I didn't know she had fallen this far. However, the next morning, she doesn't want him to go, but he is going anyway because he's got some stuff to do. Also, Madani wants Prince from the thing from the last episode. However, problem is, the one guy that she's looking for is actually not in the system. So that's it's a bit annoying. However, as we have learned, we are dealing with some powerful people who can make people disappear, probably. So Billy and his crew, they decide to practice the robbery. Everyone each time gets different positions so that everyone knows each other's positions, which in a way is actually really smart. However, technically, if one of them gets kidnapped, they could tell the whole plan. But I do find it smart. I like the way that Billy sets this up. I actually really like Billy in this season. season and also in the last season. I love how much he has changed, especially the way that the actor handles it, because he feels like a different character, but he's still Billy, you know? That's because of the memory loss. However, they're gonna rob the place tomorrow, so during the night, Jake sneaks out because he wasn't allowed to leave earlier because of the fact that he wants meth. Simple and easy. Or math. We're gonna call it math. You know, we're not gonna call it the word, but math. He wants that. However, while he goes out to get that, he also gets caught by Castle and Curtis. So then Castle starts to interrogate him, which once again Madani has a problem with. Like, come on, shut it. Let Castle do what he likes to do, okay? It's the best way to get the answers. However, eventually Jake does indeed break and gives Castle everything about the robbery. And also the place that they were staying at. Which maybe there was a plan from Jake, who knows? Because when Castle arrives at the warehouse, it's just as they drive away. So then they get to the location of the robbery, where the robbery is currently taking place, and Castle's like, I'm gonna go alone, Curtis. So inside, the gang gets inside, and the one woman doesn't want to open up the door. But then another guy, who was also part of the whole robbery scheme, he opens the door because of the fact that he's supposed to work there, and lets them in. They take the money and also take him as a hostage so that they can escape. However, once they get outside, a guy with an army vest and a red mask yells, Russo! And is like, oh great, Jake is here. Well, you're too late. But then when he yells it again, Billy's like, wait a minute, that's not Jake. And then Frank takes off his mask, he takes off the jacket, and under that he has the Punisher thing from season 1, and it's like, here you go, the truth will set you free, Billy. You now know that Frank was the one who did this to you. He was the one who did it. So Billy has an existential crisis about that, and so then the squad goes up against Frank. He takes a couple of them out, as Frank usually does, but Billy stands there just frozen. And then eventually one of the guys is able to put Billy into a car so that they are able to escape. However, Frank then takes a car and follows them, and now he also has to deal with a sniper that was also part of the plan. Billy really thought of everything. However, that sniper might be a little bit of a problem. So Curtis goes upstairs and takes care of the sniper, while Billy wants the dude to stop so that he can fight against the Punisher. And he's like, Frank, did you do this to me? Were you the one who did it? And he's like, yeah, I did. So they have a little bit of a gunfight. However, then the cops arrive, so Frank is like, I'm gonna run away because there's no way I can do anything here right now. I can't kill Billy right now. I gotta go. However, Mahoney sees him and chases him down, and he eventually corners him until Curtis holds a big sniper rifle to his head, and he's like, hey, let him go. However, Frank is like, hey, are you gonna follow us? And he's like, yeah, I am. It's like, okay, knocks him down and runs away with Curtis. So then two of the guys of Billy's squad are not really happy with the way that Billy handled everything because, you know, he froze and all that stuff, but Billy then shoots the two of them, and we get the truth revealed. Apparently, Frank froze when he saw Billy because of the fact that Billy looked at him like his old friend. When Frank pulled off that mask, he saw his buddy. Okay, and that caused Frank to pause. And the same thing happened to Curtis. He had a shot on Billy, and he also didn't take it because we need more episodes, and we can't really do much with the Pilgrim guy, sadly enough. I mean, if we shot Billy right now, the rest of the episodes could have dealt with the Pilgrim guy, but like, yeah, Billy is gonna be here until the end. So Billy goes back to Krista, and he has a bit of a panic attack about the fact that it's like, but Frank is my friend, but he did this to me. Why? And I very much like the way that the actor portrayed it. Big fans, as I probably already said in the review, because I'm probably gonna talk him up in the review itself. Also, Amy is playing with the shotty, and also later on with a ball. So Frank and Curtis, they arrive back at the hideout, I guess you could say. However, Amy tries to surprise Frank with a move, but that kind of goes wrong when he almost kills her in that sense. And she immediately becomes kind of traumatized by it, but it's understandable. You're dealing with the Punisher and all, but he, in a way, in his own way, he wants to keep her safe. So Mahoney visits Madani about the whole thing, and since Madani called Mahoney, he wants to know all that she knows. However, sadly enough, the one thing that she does not know is a location for him. And also, she does not give up Curtis. So that's nice of her. However, like I said, she can't really give Mahoney a location. And to be honest, Mahoney really only wants his gun back. So Frank goes back to Jake in order to get some information, which causes him to have a little bit of a blowout with Curtis. So that wasn't really helpful. And also, he didn't really get much out of Jake. But at this point, also, Curtis says something that hits Frank. And it's like, you are just like Billy. And Frank is like, I'm not like Billy. I'm not. But technically, you are. Basically, just the two sides of the same coin. Because you are just like Billy, except for one thing. Billy Billy robs, steals, and you kill bad guys. That's the only real difference. Outside of that, you are kind of the same. Also, Billy gets violent in Krista's home because of the fact that he's like, how long have you known that Frank was Punisher? And all that stuff. Which he's like, I don't know. And then he starts smashing stuff around. And then when he's ready to just, I don't know, throw her out the window, she's like, I love you. And then it's like, oh, okay. Weird moment to say that. I'm learning a lot from women now. I learn a lot about women. So you push them against something, and then they stab you in the hand, and that is when you kiss them. That is, and then also you break all their stuff, and then they will say that they love you. Learning a lot about women in these episodes. Thank you very much, Punisher Season 2, for teaching me a lot about women. I shall put this to no use at all, because don't do that. This is more for comedic purposes than anything. We're not gonna do this in real life. That is not good. However, Billy then leaves, and I don't know if he's gonna come back. Maybe he is gonna come back. But he then leaves, and he goes back to his boys. Apparently, there are only 3 left. I don't know where the rest of them are. Probably split. And he's like, here's the money. However, do you want scraps, or do you want something bigger? Because I want an army. An army of loyal people. So I guess he's now gonna become maybe more like comic book Jigsaw. He also gets called Jigsaw in this episode, but it's like his face is not messed up enough for him to be called Jigsaw. So it's like the people in the show are seeing something different than what we are seeing on screen. That's kind of what it feels like. So after the little bit of a fight with Frank, Curtis goes back to the hideout. However, he does not announce himself, so because of the fact that he drops his keys, Amy almost shoots him because she pulls the trigger. However, like I said, because he dropped the keys, he was able to duck out of the way by accident. He just ducked and pick up the keys and then shotgun blast right over him. And then she invites him in for spaghetti. So that is also something maybe I can learn about women. Announce yourself or be shot by a shotgun. However, if you live, you get spaghetti. So they have a little bit of a chat. Then later on, Madani appears as well. And I guess they're just sitting there eating some spaghetti and waiting to figure out what the next plan is. Are we gonna turn Frank in or not? Like, what's gonna happen? And then to end the episode, Frank is sitting at his wife's grave. So Frank returns to the hideout, and then according to Amy, we have a bit of a Punisher pity party. However, Frank basically just tells them, you have to accept the fact that I'm the Punisher. I am the Punisher, deal with it. Simple. Meanwhile, Jigsaw's crew are robbing gangs throughout the city, and also Curtis is tracking all of their movement. And we learn that when he's finished with Frank, he'll leave with Krista. So that's beautiful. He'll leave this gang life behind. But first, he's gotta finish up with Frank. Also, the Schultz want to have a bounty on Castle because of the fact that Pilgrim isn't getting the job done alone. And at this point, we cannot let one of the 7 deadly sins be in control. That being pride, as always. We cannot let that be in control. We gotta do it smart. Put the whole city on watch. So Frank gets a location for where a robbery is taking place. He kills the guys. Billy is not there, sadly enough. However, he does find a phone, and he uses the guy's thumb in order to unlock it, which is actually funny. You can't do that with my phone. My phone is code only. I never actually put my thumbprint into my phone. So you're not gonna get that one. Or even like my eye or anything like that. It's just code-wise. In situations like this, if you kill me, you still can get into my phone. But in the phone, he sees a picture of the girl from earlier at a party that he kind of assaulted in a way until Jigsaw was like, hey, stop that. Also, Schultz golfs with his son and tells him to give up on certain things and come home for a little bit. At least until I guess Pilgrim is finished with everything. Just come home. But the son doesn't really want to come home. Understandable, you know, especially when your parents are like that. So Pilgrim goes to his old contacts, and when he finds one, that one actually later on when Pilgrim leaves, he calls someone, is like, hey, a ghost just walked in here. So that's not gonna be good for Pilgrim. Also, Amy is like, look, man, we are basically just the cheerleading squad for Punisher. And Kurt's like, you're right, I'm going back to group. And back at group, he apologizes to the squad, and also he tells them about Billy and asks them to look out for Billy. Which actually one of them does. One of them just pees on a fence while some of Billy's guys are doing stuff in the background. And yeah, that was actually pretty cool. I like that one. Where he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna take this 100% seriously and actually be like a homeless person that pisses. Also, Amy decides to leave because of the fact that she just wants to get out of town, and she goes back to her old friend. That was referenced earlier in the season. At this point, She-Hulk will be like, it's all connected, like a normal TV series would be. Well, you're not there yet. We'll get there eventually. And also, Billy has apparently visited Madani's place. He's there right now, and that is actually going to come into play a bit later on. So Frank goes to the girl, and he questions her, but she's like, I don't know anything anything. But then Frank pulls out the phone and the guy's thumb that he apparently cut off, use it to unlock the phone, and then she gives him all the information that he needs. And then for some reason, I forgot what the reason was. I was also eating while this episode was happening. But anyway, he puts the thumb inside of like a drink next to the barman. Is like, well, why did you do that? However, when he goes outside, he's being followed, and then he learns that there's a bounty on him and the girl. So Madani comes home, and Billy is still there, and he basically asks her what he did to Frank. And then Madani tells him everything that he did, and he can't believe it. And he's like, I'm gonna leave your weapons downstairs, okay? And if you follow me, my men will kill you. So after that, he is having a little bit of an existential crisis about everything, and he's like, why didn't he then just kill me, okay? Why leave me like this? Like, dude, yeah, that's what everyone is wondering, but that's because we needed a season 2. That's why he left you like that. If this was a one-time only season, he would have killed you, but they wanted you back in season 2. So Amy visits her friend, who initially is like, yay, but since the bounty is on the end, also Frank tries to call her, but she doesn't pick up. But since the bounty is there, yeah, Amy's friend is definitely going to betray her, which she does. So she goes off in order to get the fake IDs or whatever she was gonna get, and eventually Amy picks up, and Frank tells her about the bounty, and then asks her for the location where she is right now. And after a little bit, Amy sends a text, so Castle's off to save the girl, which is good because of the fact that at that point also we have some guys who come in. Amy also left the apartment, went upstairs, and tries to hide in some other place. So then they're angry at the girl because of the fact that Amy's not there, so they tie her up, and then afterwards go and search, but she couldn't have gone downstairs because of the fact that they came up. So if she's still in the building, she has to be upstairs. So they search upstairs. Frank comes in, just guns everyone down in his way, except for one guy who has actually found Amy, and Amy then uses the disarming technique and shoots him, and then she has a bit of a panic attack about the fact that she shot him, and then she's like, oh my god, I killed him. And Frank's like, no, you didn't. Here, give me the gun, and shoots the dude. It's like, I killed him. Which I love that. He's just like, I killed him. Don't worry about it. Your conscience is clean. You only shot him. I killed him. Don't worry about it. Come on, let's go. So they head back to the hideout. Also, Krista calls Madani over, and they have a little bit of a chat. And then to end the episode, Pilgrim gets attacked. So let's see if he can survive. Of course he can. So Billy has finally figured out how to break Castle. What a guy. But first, we got some flashbacks of the army beating both Billy and Frank because of the fact that apparently that was just an initiation or something like that. And Frank and Kurt, for the first part of this episode, are basically just spying on Billy's operation. However, what they don't know is that Billy from another rooftop is also spying on them. And Pilgrim has taken care of the guys that were going to kill him or beat him up. I don't actually know if they were gonna kill him, but maybe they were gonna kill him. But they did beat him up, that is for sure. So then Madani continues her talk with Krista, and she basically defends Castle because of the fact that Frank's had a code, you know? He has a code. He doesn't kill innocent people, which is very important for later on. And also, we have a little bit of a talk from Curtis about the assassins during the Crusade area. And I know that it was actually like something that happened in real life, but I couldn't help but thinking about my boy Altair Ibn Ahad. Could not help but think about him, even though I know that's not what he was talking about, but that's why I wrote it, just in order for that. So, it is time for Frank to go in. Kind of. He will go in once the girls are gone. That is basically when he goes in. So Billy plans with the guys about how it's gonna go because of the fact that he knows Frank is out there, obviously. So he sets up an ambush for Frank. And then he sends the girls home, let the Punisher in, basically. So Frank goes in. However, initially it looks to be going well until he gets a bit ambushed and gets beaten up. However, instead of killing him, Billy's like, beat him more and then finish him off. However, Frank then gets the upper hand, beats up everyone, kills the guys, obviously, as Castle normally does, you know. He isn't called Punisher for nothing. And then he continues to follow Billy while killing more people. And eventually he sees Billy going upstairs, so he wildly fires his gun upstairs in order to kill Billy. However, once he gets upstairs, he sees a bunch of dead women. Well, not, three dead women. And that is when he breaks. Billy also escapes, and then to end the episode, Billy learned how to break Castle because of the fact of Madani and Krista's talk that allowed him to do it. Also, Kurt shot a guy, and he sadly enough died. And while it does seem like I don't really have much to say about this episode, that is literally all that really happens in this episode. It's just a bunch of waiting until like the big ending thing. However, unlike Jessica Jones season 2, this one actually did it tastefully. you know, it is interesting the talk between Krista and also Madani. It is interesting the whole spying on Billy's operation, waiting for that moment when Castle goes in and stops it. However, Castle's killed innocent people, and to end the episode, by the way, he also gets taken away by the cops. But he has killed innocent people now. He has spilled innocent blood, the one thing that prevented the Punisher from being like all the others. Because I know Batman has the code. Batman is like, I don't kill because of the fact that it'll make me just like them. Punisher has the code where it's like, I kill, but I don't kill innocents, and if I do, I'll be just like them. So it's like that. There's like 2 steps that Batman has to take in order to become the full-on bad guy, because if he takes one more step in the killing scenario, then he becomes the Punisher, and then if he takes one more step forward, he becomes a bad guy. Punisher is like treading that line very carefully of being, well, actually, he's got one foot on both ends, technically. But that is really all I can say about the episode. This feels really short, and I'm sorry if it's really short, but like, there wasn't really anything else that happened in the episode. Alright, boys, we got a lot more that happens. Also, the thing that I forgot to talk about in the last episode is that Pilgrim was in a hotel. That's basically it. I don't really want to go into any further, outside of the fact that he saw some visions of his wife. So in this episode, Frank gets taken to the hospital because we have a lot more to talk about. Kurt also returns to the hideout and tells Amy what happened, and then he's gonna take a shower because he doesn't want to save Frank, but Amy does. Amy wants to save Frank, but Curtis is done. So Pilgrim's wife dies, and Mrs. Schultz kind of lies to him about it, and we have the return of Karen Page, and she uses the power of Nelson and Murdoch in order to get inside. And also, because it's Karen Page, you're not gonna deny her. She can talk her way into any place, probably. And they have a nice little chit-chat, but the thing that comes clear out of all of it is that Frank has given up because of the fact that he killed innocent women. He is just like the people that he takes out, and he deserves to die now. That is the point that Frank is at. Also, Amy has left in order to save Frank, so now Curtis is alone in the trailer. And Madani arrives at the police investigation in order to join in on the investigation, and basically Mahoney just takes her around the whole thing, shows her exactly what happened, and there's some things not adding up because a lot of people were using rubber bullets. That doesn't really add up when you're going up against someone called the Punisher, okay? You want to use some real bullets in order to put him into the ground. So Amy makes her way inside a room where Frank is, and she wants to help him escape because of the fact that there's a 5 million bounty on them, and they need to kind of get out of here, but Frank wants her to get out of here instead. But then Madani joins in because she wanted to visit Frank, and now the whole gang's here, boys. Outside of Curtis, we have everyone. Frank is so popular with the ladies. However, then Billy calls Madani, and she puts him on speakerphone, and he is just calling to gloat about everything. And then after the phone call, he tells Krista, are you okay with what we've done? Okay, we sacrificed 3 women in order for us to have this escape plan. And he's also scared that eventually Krista is gonna hate him, but she's like, no, don't worry. So then Karen and Madani are sitting alone, and Karen is like, I'll help you figure out. I'll get you into the morgue. That'll give us the answer that we need. So we go down to the morgue, and Karen makes a deal with the guy in order to give him her shoes, which, by the way, why didn't he give her his shoes then? That's kind of weird. And also, he's a weird guy. But basically, the morgue guy is like, well, and no one would survive a shot from this close. And it's like, close? What do you mean? Yeah, look, couple of steps, you know, like maybe like if they both stretched out their arms, they could touch each other that length. However, Frank was downstairs when he shot, so he didn't do it. Turns out Billy shot the girls, and it was all a setup for Frank. Also, we learn a little bit more about Krista and the KM. KM was her dad, and also the mom wanted a divorce from the dad, but he didn't want the mom to have full custody over Krista. So what he did was he grabbed her, he said he loved her, jumped out the window, and killed himself, but did not kill Krista. So she still got technically full custody over Krista. So Schultz's wife arrives at Pilgrim's place and tells him that his wife is dead, but that he has to finish the job. And then Pilgrim has a little bit of a panic attack by throwing stuff across the room, or just an angry attack. And then he leaves in order to go to the hospital. And also, an Irish cop is there in order to kill Frank. He takes over the shift and then goes aside in order to kill him. And Frank is ready to do it, but then Amy tries to intervene. However, when she's about to be killed, Frank has a little bit of a different opinion, because like, hey, kill me, don't kill her. However, then Madani steps in to save Amy, and Madani and Karen tell Frank the truth. And at this point, Castle's back, baby. So Pilgrim arrives at the hospital. He goes upstairs, but Frank needs to get out of here now, because now that he knows the truth, he has a reason to fight. So Karen walks out, sets off all of the fire alarms, while Castle changes clothes with the cop that tried to kill him, and then the nurses wheel the cop guy out with thinking that it's Frank, and Frank pretends to be a cop in order to sneak out together with Madani. So he escapes the hospital. One little problem though, Mahoney finds them and he's like, put the stuff on the ground and get into the ambulance because I'm taking you to the police station. And Castle agrees because there's nothing he can do right now, so he gets into the ambulance. So as Mahoney is driving the ambulance, he wants to hear nothing from Frank nor from Madani, okay? He's taking Frank to jail, and also Madani is going to get into trouble because of this as well. And nothing's gonna stop that except for the fact that Pilgrim pulls up next to them and starts shooting into the thing, and then also flips it by making it crash off a bridge. However, then Madani comes in order to help out with the whole Pilgrim situation, while Frank and Mahoney are downstairs with the ambulance. However, sadly enough, Pilgrim does steal Madani's car, so that wasn't really all that smart. So Frank is like, don't worry, Mahoney, help is coming. Okay? But I gotta leave. He uncuffs himself, walks outside, puts his shoulder back into place against the side of the ambulance. However, then he sees fire and gas and is like, ah, boy, that's gonna be a boom. So he goes back inside. He finds scissors, frees Mahoney, pulls him out, takes him away. You have the explosion, as you do. And afterwards, Mahoney's like, I gotta take you in. And Frank is like, all right, do what you gotta do, and walks away because Mahoney can't really shoot him in the back, you know? He can't arrest him because he's too wounded, but also, the only way to stop him is to shoot him. He can't do that either, so he lets him go. So later on, Mahoney and Madani have a little bit of a conversation about that, and I guess maybe now Mahoney has finally got a little respect for good old Frank. However, there's someone else who knows about the escape, and that is Krista, and Billy then learns it as well, but she initially didn't want to tell him because she just wanted to escape, but now he knows. However, he is not necessarily going after Frank. Frank, however, has a different man in mind because he somehow is able to use the police in order to be able to find the home of the Schultz son. He uses his badge number in order to gain access, but he goes over there, kidnaps the Schultz son. However, the Schultz son knows nothing about what is happening, as we know. Also, Pilgrim gets to the hideout because of the fact that he, I guess, backtraces Madani's car's locations. However, Curtis is the only one home. Amy is not there. So, Pilgrim is like, you know, I used to be racist. Yeah, I used to be racist. Not anymore, though. Character growth and all that stuff. But, you're lying to me, so I'm gonna beat it out of you. However, before he can start the beating, Amy shows up, which causes a big fight. However, Amy is able to escape, but Curtis is in a bad position. So then when Frank gets back to the hideout, he sees Kurt in a bad position, and then he decides to call Amy. However, the phone is outside, and Amy is not outside, so Frank thinks that he still took Amy. So Billy heads over to the boys, gives them new passports as thanks for all the help, and then he's ready to leave with his woman. So then Frank interrogates the Schultz son. However, he truly knows nothing, but he tells him everything that has happened over the course of this season, which the son is obviously shocked by. And then Frank is like, well, if I can't get to you, I'm gonna make a call to your parents, which will happen in the next episode. So then Pilgrim arrives back at his hotel, and he gets out of the car. What he does not know is that he has a bit of a stowaway because Amy got into the back of the car for some reason, and this is how Frank might learn where Pilgrim is hiding. So Madani earlier had a phone conversation with Krista. However, she said something that Madani needed to investigate about her. So she goes by in order to investigate whether she actually has been harboring a fugitive this entire time, which is actually true. So eventually Krista goes to do something, and Madani finds some evidence in order to link it, and is like, oh, okay, so he has been here this entire time. So then Madani's like, alright, now I gotta pull out the gun and take her in. However, then a big fight happens, and eventually Madani pushes Krista out of the window, you know, maybe second time's the charm, you know, first time it didn't really work, but this time she's going alone, so maybe we'll have better luck this time. However, the problem is, Madani stares down at what she's done. She walks away, she grabs her coat, also turns off the fire. Billy stands there and is like, no, what's happened to my beautiful woman? And then he looks up, but the problem is, Madani then walks back to the window. And if she did not do that, this could have been suicide. But because she did that, Billy now knows, okay, you did it, so he is coming for her. And also, I love the song at the beginning of the episode when when Pilgrim came into the picture because she had like, you say God and I say Satan. I thought that was a really fun song for that specific scene. I had to point that out as well. Here we are, boys, the finale. Finally, we're here. And Billy comes in hot, ready to kill Madani, but she fights him off, puts a couple of bullets in him. However, he chokes her out and apparently later on escapes. But basically, we got a little bit of a double knockout, but he woke up first and escaped. Also, the Schultzes are ready to burn Pilgrim and just take care of his sons, which, well, I mean, that second part is probably just a nice sentiment, but that first part is like, not really. And Frank calls Schultz in order to be able to just make the deal. And he's like, all right, I'll give you your son if you give me the kid. You can call me on this number. But also, he's like, the husband is like, how dare you touch my son? If you touch my son again, and Frank just punches him. And then you'll what, huh? I like Frank so much. But Amy has found Pilgrim's room, and Schultz calls Pilgrim about everything, and he lies to them, being like, yeah, I got the kid, but no, he doesn't. So Amy texts Frank the location, and Frank gets there. However, when Frank kicks down the room, no one's home because of the fact that it's 2 rooms, and he's in the other room. So then we have a shooting at the wall, and then afterwards, Frank gets outside the room, goes to the other room. However, Pilgrim uses the in-between door to get to the other room, so basically they switch rooms, and they once again start shooting at the wall. And I'm like, how is this wall still standing? Because that shouldn't be possible. However, Amy then gets a bit too close, which allows Pilgrim to take her, and now he does have her. So then Pilgrim gets into the elevator and escapes with Amy. However, then another elevator opens with 3 cops in it, and it's like, okay, we need an extra action sequence. We have Punisher versus the cops. As the elevator goes down, he takes them all out. However, he's not able to stop the car, and he loses Amy. So Billy finds a doctor to stitch him up. However, once Billy loses consciousness, the doctor decides to throw him into the garbage and take the money with him. Also, Curtis, being the good guy that he is, he takes the son of the Schultzes and he gives him to Mahoney, which also kind of clears him of all charges in that sense, because Curtis is a good guy. He just held a gun to your head just to help the Punisher escape. But to be honest, I like Punisher, so I will allow that to be wiped away as well. And so does Mahoney, actually. Mahoney wipes the slate clean in that sense. Like, alright, but if you help the Punisher again, ooh, there's gonna be some trouble. So Frank now has to bluff and say that he still has the son. So then Pilgrim arrives, and Frank is like, I got the son in there. C4 strapped to his face. If I hit send, boom. So then Pilgrim allows the girl to escape, and once the horn hits, he wants the son, but Frank comes clean. I ain't got him. And then we have Pilgrim versus Punisher, which Frank should have easily been able to take on. However, he doesn't for some reason. He actually has a hard time beating him, but like, this guy is not in a good shape anymore. Okay, Frank, you should have had him, but I guess it adds more of the dramatics if it's like a more of a fair fight. However, in the end, Punisher decides not to kill him, which we learn at the end of the episode, but he decides not to kill him because of the fact that he mentioned his sons, and this is where I have a little bit of a problem as well. He should have just killed him. I'm sorry, dude. I'm sorry, but he should have killed him, and then also the children should have gone to Child Protective Services and to a foster family in that sense. I know people don't like it, but it seems like the Netflix version of Punisher is a little bit weak for children. Looking at the fact that when Amy was there, he didn't kill the pedophile. Also, when Nikolai mentioned his child, Punisher didn't kill him. And now that this one mentions his child, Punisher also doesn't kill him. So Billy calls Kurt and asks for him to help him, but that obviously isn't gonna happen. But then asks for him to come by because he doesn't want to die alone. So off screen, Kurt calls Frank. Also, Krista's still alive, so it seems like this woman is just invincible when it comes to windows. No matter how many times you throw her out a window, she's never gonna die. No matter how high that window is, it can't happen. So Frank heads over to Billy, and Billy is like, look, man, Frank, and gets shot before he can say sorry, because Frank doesn't want to hear that stuff, okay? And that ends good old Jigsaw. So next up, let's visit the Schultzes, which actually, Amy is the first one to walk in. However, when the wife wants to attack Amy, Frank kills her, and he's like, well, I had 2 bullets, and I was gonna make you both make a choice. Seems like the choice was already made. Alright, I'm gonna make the choice with you, okay? Either number 1, you will shoot yourself, or 2, we're gonna have all of the information that we got over the course of this season, mainly the phone call and the photographs, and we're gonna give them to the New York Bulletin, probably to Karen Page, and it's gonna be plastered all over. So make your choice. Here's a bullet, here's a gun. Bye. So he walks out, dude shoots himself, and then Pilgrim leaves with his kids, which, a little bit indifferent about. And then finally, to end everything, we have the fact that we need to say goodbye to Amy. And to be honest, I've loved the connection that they've had, like a father and daughter relationship that they've had over the course of this season. Loved it. But it's time to say goodbye because Amy cannot be part anymore of this life. So goodbye. Apparently, Frank and Curtis know someone in Florida, so she's gonna stay with him. And then we jump 3 months later, where apparently Madani now works for the CIA, and she offers Frank a job. Frank is like, no, I already got a job. And he gets out, puts on his Punisher outfit, and kills 2 gangs who are meeting up. And that is the end of The Punisher Season 2. And overall, I really like this season, actually. You know, I've seen people actually be more down towards the Punisher series. Now, I've loved Season 1, as you know, if you watch the review and or spoiler talk. And I've loved this season as well throughout its entirety, you know? Like, there are problems with this season, with the fact that Frank doesn't kill the 3 characters that I've talked about already. But outside of that, I still think it's a really good Punisher season. And also, it kind of frees him from, like, the past. And now he can be full-time Punisher, which will also lead into Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Well, Season 1, technically, because that is canonically the next appearance that Punisher has in the MCU, I think. Yeah, that's the next one. And then we have Born Again Season 2, Spider-Man Brand New Day, and then his own special this year, because we are not even close to being done with Frank this year. We got a lot more Frank goodness coming, and I'm super excited. But like I said, I very much like this season. The 3 lack of kills is really my only problem that I have with this season. But overall, I've loved it, and I love this series. And I'm gonna end it here. So let me know what you guys thought about this season in the comment section down below. With that being said, thank you all so very much for watching, and I hope you guys have enjoyed. And if you did, please like button, subscribe if you're new, if done so already, turn on notifications, don't forget to check out my Let's Play channel, link in the description and at the end of the video. And like I said, we are not done with Man of the Year yet, but first we must say goodbye to something else, and that is the Netflix era, because we have only 1 more season, boys. Because yes, the drunken gal got an extra season, and we'll be taking a look at her next time. Maybe not next week, but at least next time, continuity wise, in the MCU. Bye.